From my window I can see everything. The maple tree out front, the curved walkway I swept every morning for 20 years, and the porch light that still flickers, even though I told Ethan to fix it. It used to comfort me the way the glow spilled over the steps like warm honey. Now it feels like a reminder that I don't belong there anymore. Across the street, my daughter-in-law, Kara, waters the flower beds I planted with my husband before he died. The red begonias are still blooming, though she's replaced the stone border with something sleek and gray. She never liked color, says it makes a home look dated. I watch her, her neat ponytail catching the sunlight, her white shoes never touching the soil. Every motion of hers is sharp, deliberate. She acts like she's erasing me 1 inch at a time. I keep the curtains drawn just enough to see but not enough to be seen. My room smells of dust and weak coffee, the kind of scent that sticks to quiet people. The landlord calls it a cozy suite, but it's really a converted attic with walls that sigh when the wind shifts. The mattress dips in the middle, and the faucet leaks, but the rent is paid, and the view is worth it. From here, I can watch the life that used to be mine. When I moved out, I told everyone it was temporary, that Kara needed space after my husband's passing, that Ethan wanted to handle things his way. Lies come easier when they sound like kindness, but the truth arrived in a small metallic click, the sound of a lock turning against me. That morning I came back from visiting my sister in Ohio. My suitcase was light, just a few clothes and the tin box where I kept my husband's watch. The porch smelled like rain and detergent. I remember humming while reaching for my keys. Then the key stopped halfway. Jammed. I pushed harder. Nothing. The metal edge dug into my palm until it hurt. When I rang the bell, Kara's voice floated through the door, calm as ever. "It's not a good time, Mom. Not a good time." I stood there, grocery bag in one hand, the sound of milk sloshing. Inside, I could hear the kettle whistling, my old kettle, the one with a chipped spout Ethan promised to replace. I waited for her to open the door to laugh and say it was a mistake. She didn't. Instead, the lock clicked again, firmer this time, and the porch light flickered on even though it was daylight. I left the groceries on the step and walked away before my knees gave out. That night, I rented this room. The landlord didn't ask questions. I said I needed something short-term close to Rosehaven Lane. I didn't tell him I used to own the house across the street. It's easier that way. The first few nights I couldn't sleep. I'd wake every hour to check if the house was still there, like a child guarding a toy from a thief. Then one evening I saw Kara through the window laughing with a man I didn't recognize. He wore a navy suit and held a folder. They shook hands in the hallway, right under the picture of my wedding day. My stomach twisted. That's when I started keeping notes. Every entry begins the same 8:15 p.m. Porch light on. Visitors arrived. It makes me feel sane measuring time by someone else's routine. I bought a small camera, nothing fancy, just enough to catch what I see. A record of my absence. Yesterday, the mail carrier slipped an envelope under my door. It was addressed to Tenant 14 Rosehaven Lane. I almost laughed. Tenant. They must have forwarded something by mistake. I opened it out of habit and froze. It was a circular from a real estate agency welcoming the new homeowners of Rosehaven Lane. My house was listed in glossy print under newly renovated colonial with modern touches. My name was nowhere on it, but Kara's was right under Ethan's. I pressed my hand against the window pane until the glass turned foggy. She wasn't just pretending to own it. She'd already made it official. I told myself not to cry. Tears give shape to what you've lost, and I can't afford that yet. I need distance precision proof. So tonight I angle my camera slightly lower to catch the driveway and wait for her next guest. The clock ticks like footsteps. Across the street, the porch light flickers again and the door opens. A woman steps out clutching a clipboard. Her car bears the logo of a real estate company. She smiles, says something to Kara, and hands her a stack of papers. Kara signs without reading her pen, moving fast. My throat tightens. I zoom the lens just enough to catch her face when she looks up toward the street. She doesn't see me. She never looks this way. But I see her every movement, every lie forming in her mouth, every smile she rehearses for the world that thinks she's kind. I used to tell myself forgiveness was strength. Now I know silence can be sharper. I close my notebook, mark the page, and whisper to the empty room, "You took my home, Kara. Now watch me take it back." Outside, the porch light flickers once more, then goes dark. I still remember the sound the screwdriver made sharp against the brass. It was late morning sun slicing through the lace curtains, and Kara was humming to herself as if she were redecorating, not dismantling the last piece of my life. The dog from next door barked once, then went quiet, like even it knew something wrong was happening. I was sitting at the kitchen table spreading marmalade on toast. She'd come in wearing her crisp linen blouse, sleeves rolled up, hair pinned perfectly. Just updating the locks, she said, all casual confidence, a jingling bag of tools in her hand. "You know, safety and all that." I blinked at her, not understanding. Safety from what? Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "The neighborhood's changing. Ethan and I talked. We think it's best." Ethan was at work. He was always at work when decisions were made. I remember watching her unscrew the old knob, the one my husband installed the year after Ethan was born. He'd laughed that day, saying, "No thief's taking my house while I'm alive." Now his door, his home, was being stripped like it never belonged to us. When the new lock clicked into place, Kara handed me a spare key in a neat paper envelope. "Here you go," she said. "Don't lose it." The words were sweet, but carried an undertone the kind people use when they've already decided you're forgetful. I tucked the envelope into my apron pocket, though I knew I wouldn't need it. I still had the real key, the one hidden under the porch brick since 1989. For the rest of that day, I felt invisible in my own house. Every sound, the screwdriver, the hammer, the crinkle of plastic from the new key, felt louder than it should. I wanted to ask Ethan why he'd agreed to this, but when he came home, Kara was beside him holding his arm, smiling like a hostess. "Mom, Kara just wants us to be safe," he said, tired. "You know how things are these days?" I stared at him. He couldn't even meet my eyes. The room smelled like lemon polish and betrayal. That evening, I baked a small chicken, the kind my husband used to carve on Sundays. The knife felt heavy in my hand. Kara complimented the dinner, told me I should rest more, that she'd take care of the house things from now on. When Ethan excused himself to take a call, she leaned forward and lowered her voice. "Don't worry, Mom. You'll still have your space. You just have to trust me." I wanted to ask what she meant, but her smile silenced me. It was the kind of smile people use before they close a door. Later that night, I went outside to throw the trash. The porch light flickered that same failing bulb my husband never got to fix. I bent down to check the loose brick, the one beside the step. The key was still there, cool against my fingers. I pressed it into my palm until I felt its teeth. Inside, through the kitchen window, Kara was folding napkins, humming again. My son sat in the living room, head bent over his phone. I stood there for a long time, the wind lifting the hem of my robe, before slipping the key back beneath the brick. Something inside me whispered that I'd need it someday. By morning, the spare key Kara had given me was gone. I found the envelope in the trash can, torn in half. When I asked her, she pretended not to hear. That was the last day I lived in my house. When I left, she helped me pack. "Just until the renovations are done," she said, placing my clothes neatly into boxes. Her tone was careful, practiced. I told her I'd stay at my sister's for a bit. She kissed my cheek, and for a second I thought I smelled the perfume I used to wear. "You take care now," she whispered. I looked around the room one last time. The photo of Ethan in high school, the curtains I'd sewn with my own hands, the clock still ticking above the mantel. My husband's chair sat by the window, angled toward the garden. Kara never sat in it, not even once. I guess even she could feel his presence there. When I closed the door behind me, I heard the bolt slide shut. Weeks later, I'd learned she had the locks changed again the very next day. At the time, I told myself I was imagining things, that she was just trying to help, that maybe this was what families did, pass homes along a just compromise. But the truth is simpler and colder. She wanted the house, and she knew how to get it. I wasn't ready to fight her then. I still believed kindness was armor, but kindness only works on people who have hearts. Kara had ambition instead. That night, I slept in my sister's guest room, the air smelling like lavender and unfamiliar linens. I kept waking up hearing the sound of that lock turning over and over again. By morning, I knew something had broken in me, something I'd need to rebuild carefully, quietly, piece by piece. The next day, I packed my husband's watch, a change of clothes, and a notebook. I caught the bus back to Rosehaven Lane and rented the first room I could find across the street from the house that no longer had my name. If she wanted to keep me out, she should have chosen a street without windows. It started with laughter, the kind that doesn't belong in a house built on grief. The sound carried across Rosehaven Lane one mild Thursday evening, fluttering through the open windows like a taunt. I was sitting by my window with a cup of weak tea, the camera steady on the sill, when I heard Kara's voice rise above the others, sharp, bright, rehearsed. "To new beginnings," she said, and glasses clinked. There were cars lined along the curb headlights, slicing through the dusk. The front porch glowed like a stage. My porch. She'd hung new lights, expensive ones, probably from one of those home renovation shows she binge-watched. From this side of the street, I could see women in heels and men in pressed shirts, a small crowd moving through my living room like it had always belonged to them. The irony didn't escape me. They were celebrating a theft. Through my lens, I caught Kara in the middle of them all, her hand resting on Ethan's shoulder. She wore a deep blue dress that shimmered under the chandelier my husband installed for our 40th anniversary. Ethan smiled polite, but distracted like he was somewhere else entirely. When someone handed him a glass, he hesitated before drinking. I recognized that gesture, the nervous twist of his ring, the same one he had as a boy when he lied about breaking a window. I couldn't hear their words, just bursts of laughter and the soft hum of jazz. Then a man with slicked hair and a silver tie shook Kara's hand. I zoomed in. His clipboard bore the logo of a real estate agency. He pointed at the mantel, then toward the staircase. Kara followed him eagerly, showing off every room. My stomach turned. A housewarming party, I thought. No, this was a showing. She was selling it. The porch light flickered, and I saw Ethan standing alone near the doorway, looking toward the street. For a second, I thought he'd seen me, but he turned away back into the laughter. I sat there until the moon climbed higher, every sound from that house scraping across my nerves. I wrote everything down, the time, the number of guests, the name of the agency on the clipboard. Then I turned off the camera and stared at the reflection in my window. I didn't look like myself anymore. My face had gone hard angles, replacing softness. Revenge reshapes you quietly, the way a tide wears down stone. At dawn, I took a walk to clear my head. The town hadn't changed much, same bakery smell drifting from the corner shop, same mailboxes dented by time. I stopped outside the diner near Main Street, where an old voice called my name. "Nora Bennett," I said, surprised. She looked almost the same, sharp eyes, hair streaked silver, the same purposeful stride she had when she sold us our house 30 years ago. "Margaret Whitmore," she said slowly, as if confirming a ghost. "I thought you moved away." "Not far," I replied. "Just across the street from where I used to live." Her face tightened. "I heard about the change in ownership. Rough business. You doing okay?" I wanted to lie to pretend I was fine, but the words came out brittle. She changed the locks, Nora, and now she's selling it. Nora's jaw set. Selling? It's not legally hers to sell unless your name's off the deed. I looked down at my hands, trembling. Maybe it already is. We sat in the booth by the window, the same one where my husband and I used to eat after church. Nora ordered 2 coffees and pulled out a small notepad. Tell me everything she said. I told her about the day the locks changed, about the letter addressed to the tenant, about the realtor's clipboard, and Kara's smile. I didn't tell her how much it hurt to see Ethan standing in that doorway, pretending not to notice me watching. When I finished, she nodded slowly. I can look into the records at the county office. If there's a transfer, it'll show up there. But Margaret, if she forged anything, we'll need proof. And time's not on your side. There's a statute window for contesting property fraud. Her words buzzed in my head all the way back to my rented room. Proof, time, both things Kara thought I didn't have. That night, I watched the house again. The party was over, only the porch light still burning. Through the window, I saw Kara alone, tidying glasses, humming softly. Ethan was nowhere in sight. She stopped suddenly, glancing toward the curtain, maybe sensing the weight of my eyes. I lowered the camera, let the room go dark, and whispered, "I see you." The words felt dangerous, solid, a promise. Tomorrow Nora would start digging, and I would stop waiting to be forgiven. Nora called 2 days later. I'd barely slept. My notebook lay open on the nightstand, filled with times, names, every detail that could matter. When the phone finally rang, I answered before the first buzz ended. "You were right," she said. Her tone was flat professional, but I could hear something underneath it. Disbelief, maybe anger. "There's a transfer on record. Joint ownership signed 6 months ago. Kara Whitmore. Ethan Whitmore. The signature on your portion looks off." I gripped the edge of the desk. Off. "It's a copy, not an original. Someone forged your signature, Margaret." For a long time, I didn't speak. The air in the room seemed to thicken, pressing against my lungs. She filled the silence. "If we can prove the forgery, you can contest it. But the clock's ticking. There's a statute on these filings. How much time? 60 days, maybe less." I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat by the window again, staring across at my house. It looked so peaceful. Kara's car parked neatly, curtains drawn, a vase of lilies by the window. I wondered if she picked them because I used to love them, or because she knew they'd mock me from afar. That night I began collecting. Not rage, not yet just pieces of her carelessness. A slip of paper left on the windshield when she forgot to renew her parking permit. A screenshot of her social posts bragging about our new home. I started small, quiet, precise. 2 evenings later, I found Nora waiting outside the diner, again folder tucked under her arm. I pulled copies of the paperwork she said, sliding them across the table. "Take a look." The handwriting was close, frighteningly close. My name in a shape I recognized but didn't remember writing. The date was 3 days after my husband's funeral. I'd been sedated on sleeping pills, barely able to speak, much less sign anything. "She used that week," I murmured. Nora nodded. "She probably had Ethan sign his part too under pressure. It's legal on paper, but morally rotten." Her voice trailed off. We both stared at the documents, the weight of them settling like dust on our shoulders. "What do I do?" I asked quietly. "You start by not showing your hand. Let her believe she's safe. We'll get a handwriting analysis, maybe a statement from your doctor proving you weren't coherent that week. But you," she tapped the folder, "you have to stay invisible until we're ready." Invisible? I almost laughed. I'd been invisible since the day she changed the locks. "I can do that," I said. Walking home, I felt something shift in me, not hope exactly, but direction. like a river that had finally found its slope. When I reached my building, I caught sight of Kara outside my old house arguing on the phone. Her voice carried through the still air. "No, it's fine. She's not coming back. She's old. She doesn't even drive anymore." I stopped behind the maple tree. I watched her pacing her gestures tight. Then for the briefest moment, she looked straight at the window of my rented room, though she couldn't possibly see me, and smiled. The kind of smile that said she'd already won. I pressed the folder closer to my chest and whispered, "Keep smiling." The next morning, I called Nora again. "I'm going to play the fool," I told her. "What do you mean I'll let her think I'm confused, that I'm weak? Maybe she'll show me more if she doesn't feel watched." There was a pause on the line, then Nora said, "Just be careful, Margaret. People like her, they get cruel when they sense they're losing control." "I know," I said softly, "but she won't see it coming." That day I walked across the street for the first time in months. My heart pounded like I was trespassing, though the sidewalk belonged to everyone. Kara opened the door before I could knock, surprise flickering across her face. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "I was in the neighborhood," I said, smiling as gently as I could. "Thought I'd see how you're doing." She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Ethan's not home. That's all right." Inside, everything smelled different, sterile, synthetic. My husband's chair was gone, replaced by something sleek and metallic. The photos on the wall were hers now, her family, her vacations, her curated life. "I miss the old curtains," I said quietly. She glanced at me. They were dated. I nodded, pretending not to hear the insult. Then as she turned toward the kitchen, I let my eyes scan the counter. Papers, bills, a folder stamped with the logo of the same loan company I'd seen before. I took note of every detail, every misplaced envelope. When I left, she hugged me tightly, her perfume thick and cloying. "You should rest more, Mom," she said. "You look tired." I smiled into her shoulder. "You might be right." By the time I returned to my room, I already had my notes written down, dates, amounts, phone numbers, all scribbled in neat columns. If she'd built her kingdom on signatures and secrets, then paper would bring her down too. Outside dusk settled over the street. My reflection in the window no longer looked like a victim. It looked like someone planning an ending. The first knock startled me. It was just after sunset, when the sky turns that dull copper color and the air smells like distant rain. No one ever came to my rented room, not since Nora. When I opened the door, Ethan stood there, hands buried in his jacket pockets, his posture half collapsed, as though the weight of his silence had finally become too heavy. "Mom," he said quietly, like a question he wasn't sure I'd answer. I let him in. The floor creaked beneath his shoes, and I saw the hesitation flicker across his face. He'd never seen me live like this small bed, flickering lamp, a single chair by the window. It embarrassed him. I could tell. He looked around and said, "You should have called me if things got uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable," I repeated. "That's what you call being locked out of your own house." He winced. "Kara didn't mean it that way. You know how she is. She gets anxious about safety. She thought wrong." I kept my voice low even. "She's selling the house, Ethan." His eyes darted toward the window, anywhere but me. "That's ridiculous. There was a party," I said. "A realtor. A clipboard. I saw it all." He sat down heavily on the edge of the bed, elbows on knees, and for a moment he looked like the boy I used to comfort after nightmares. "Kara she wants to fix things. The loan situation's complicated, and loan situation," I cut in. "Is the house in debt?" He hesitated too long. That told me enough. I stood still, arms crossed. "You knew." "I didn't know it would go this far." His voice cracked. "She said it was temporary, that she'd handle it. I didn't want to worry you." "You didn't want to disappoint her," I corrected. He didn't deny it. The clock ticked softly, the rhythm filling the silence. I watched his reflection in the darkened window, small, unsure, trapped. "You're her husband," I said finally. "You should have been my protector, too." He looked up sharply, eyes wet. "You don't understand. Kara's been under pressure. Her boutique failed last year. She was drowning in debt before Dad's funeral. She said if we could refinance the house under both our names, it would save us. I thought she had your permission." I closed my eyes. The pieces aligned in that bitter way only truth does. "She used my grief," I said. He whispered, "I'm sorry." The apology hung between us, empty and late. "You could help fix it," I said. He shook his head. "Not without ruining her." "And what am I now?" I asked. "Saved." He flinched. "Mom, I'll make sure you're taken care of. I can give you money. You don't have to stay in this place." I almost laughed, but it came out as a breath. "Money. That's what my home's worth to you." He rubbed his hands together, desperate. "Please, just let it go. She's under so much stress. If you fight her—" I stepped closer, my voice steady. "If I fight her, what?" He didn't answer. His silence was an admission and a wound. When he finally left, I stood at the window again, watching him cross the street back to the house. The porch light flickered as he walked inside. Kara met him in the doorway, her silhouette sharp against the warm glow. I saw her hand on his shoulder, her head tilted just so, command disguised as comfort. He nodded once, defeated, and the door closed. I sat at my desk, opened the small recorder Nora had given me, and pressed the red button. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Record 1, I said. He came tonight. My son. He knew. He chose her." The words steadied me, anchored me in something colder than sadness. "I won't ask again," I continued. "He's gone too." I stopped the recording and played it back once, the sound of my own breath filling the room. That small piece of audio, soft, unshaken, would later become part of the evidence Nora filed. But I didn't know that then. I only knew that it felt like closing a door I'd been holding open for far too long. I placed the recorder on the sill beside my notebook, then poured myself a cup of tea. The kettle whistled, sharp and clean. Across the street, the lights dimmed one by one until the house went dark. I whispered, "You built your safety on my silence, Kara. Let's see how safe it keeps you." The whistle faded, leaving only the sound of rain beginning to fall. The street was asleep when I decided to go back. Midnight, maybe later. The air was heavy with that damp stillness that comes just before rain. From my window, I watched Kara's house, my house go dark, room by room. No movement, no sound, just the porch light glowing faintly like a heartbeat. I slipped the old spare key from my pocket. It had been waiting for me all this time, hidden under that loose porch brick. I ran my thumb along its teeth, the metal cool and familiar, and whispered to it one last time. Crossing the street felt like stepping across a line I'd been too afraid to approach. The asphalt shimmered with dew. Every footstep echoed too loud in my ears. I half expected the curtains to move, her voice to slice through the night, but nothing. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator inside. I bent down at the steps. The brick was exactly where I'd left it, though someone Kara surely had polished the porch. Even the stones smelled new. I lifted it, brushed away the dust, and there it was. My key, still waiting. The lock turned easily. She hadn't changed this one. Maybe she thought I'd forgotten. Maybe she didn't believe I'd dare. The door creaked open, a sound that made my throat tighten. I stepped into the dark foyer, the air colder than I remembered. My hand found the light switch, but I didn't turn it on. Instead, I moved by memory, the curve of the hallway, the spot where the floorboards dipped near the living room, the faint lemon polish scent Kara favored. Everything was clean, sterile, as if no one really lived there. The photographs that once lined the hallway were gone, replaced by modern prints in shiny frames. My face had been erased from every surface. In the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. I opened it out of habit: milk, imported butter, rows of sparkling water. My grocery list used to live on that same door. I remembered writing notes for my husband, "Don't forget sugar." Now it was all neat labels and pretense. Then on the counter I saw a small stack of mail. I leaned closer. Letters from the loan company overdue, notices, payment reminders. The name Kara Whitmore printed in bold across every envelope. My pulse quickened. She'd mortgaged the house. My house. I pulled my phone from my coat pocket and started taking photos, careful to silence the shutter. One by one, the letters, the amounts, the return address. The flash glinted off the silver kettle by the stove. For a moment, the room looked almost wholly bright, frozen in time. That's when I noticed something strange, a faint red light blinking near the fruit bowl. I froze. It was her phone propped up against the counter recording. The camera faced the doorway. She'd set it to catch me. The air seemed to thicken my heartbeat, filling the room. I didn't move for nearly a minute. Then I exhaled slowly and did something I hadn't planned. I smiled at the phone. Not a frightened smile, but one that said, "You think you're clever." Then I turned, unplugged the lamp beside the couch, an old habit from before, and slipped out as quietly as I came. Outside, the wind had picked up. I tucked the key back beneath the brick, making sure it settled flush with the porch. As I stepped away, I looked back once through the window. Kara's phone was still glowing faintly, watching an empty kitchen. When I reached my room, I sent the photos to Nora. My hands shook slightly as I typed, "Found proof of debt. She's drowning, also recording me. Might suspect something." Nora replied within minutes, "Don't go back there tonight. If she's baiting you, it means she's nervous. Nervous people make mistakes." I stared at the message until the letters blurred. Nervous people make mistakes. Maybe that was what I was counting on. The following morning, I checked the street. The curtains on the house were drawn tighter. The porch light was off for the first time in months. A small thing, but I felt it. She knew I'd been there. I spent the day writing everything down line after line until the notebook filled with my cramped handwriting. When dusk came, I recorded another message. "Record 2, I said softly. She knows I was inside. She's watching me now. But she doesn't know that I've already seen everything she's hiding. I placed the recorder beside the window and watched as the first lights came on across the street. For years, I'd kept that house alive with my care, polished the floors, scrubbed the windows, warmed it with the smell of bread. Now she'd filled it with secrets. But a house remembers who it belongs to. I whispered to the darkness, "You can record me, Kara, but I'm the one writing the ending." Then I turned off the light. The next morning I woke to a soft knock at my door. For one breathless moment, I thought it might be Nora, but it wasn't. When I opened it, Kara stood there. Her hair was too perfect for someone who claims surprise. She held a paper bag of pastries in one hand and that practiced smile in the other. "Morning, Mom," she said brightly. "I was just in the neighborhood. Thought you might like some croissants." I blinked once, slow, careful. "How thoughtful of you." She stepped inside before I could say yes or no, her perfume filling the cramped space. It was the same citrus scent that used to cling to the kitchen after she cleaned. She set the bag on my small table, glancing around the room. Her eyes took in everything, the folded blanket, the single cup by the sink, my notebook half hidden under a newspaper. "It's cozy," she said. "Very quaint. I manage." She turned to face me. "You came by the house last night." The words were smooth, almost gentle, but her gaze was sharp. I said nothing. She continued. I saw the camera footage this morning. You scared me, wandering around in the dark like that. You could have gotten hurt. My pulse slowed deliberately. I had trouble sleeping. Thought I left something behind. She tilted her head. You broke in. I smiled faintly. Can one break into her own home? Her jaw tightened for a fraction of a second. Then, as if catching herself, she softened. You're confused, that's all. This is getting out of hand. Ethan and I are worried about you. She sat down across from me, crossing her legs, with that easy confidence that came from thinking she'd already won. I want what's best for you, she said. Maybe assisted living. Somewhere peaceful. You've been through a lot. Losing Dad, the house stress. You deserve rest. I almost laughed, but it came out as a whisper. Rest is for people who stop fighting. Her smile wavered. You make it sound like a war. I leaned forward, voice calm, almost kind. It is Kara. You just don't know who started it. She rose abruptly, smoothing her blouse. I'll check in later, she said, and walked to the door. Just before leaving, she turned back. You can change the story all you want, Mom. But the papers don't lie. When the door closed, I let out a slow breath and sank into the chair. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from restraint. The urge to shout to accuse her pressed hard against my throat. But Nora's words echoed in my head, invisible until ready. I picked up the recorder. Record 3, I said. She came here today, said I was confused, offered a nursing home. She's scared. That's how it starts the mask cracking. That evening I met Nora at the diner again. She listened without interrupting, her eyes sharp behind her glasses. She's testing you, Nora said finally, trying to see what you know. I think she already suspects I have something. Nora slid a manila envelope across the table. Good. Letter. These are copies of the loan documents you sent. I also found more. She used your house as collateral for her boutique loan. If that defaults, she loses everything. And me. You're still technically liable as co-signer on the forged paperwork. I stared at the papers. So if she falls, I fall too. Not if we pull the right thread first, Nora said. We'll report the forgery to the County Fraud Division, but not yet. Let her debt mount a little higher. The deeper she digs, the easier it'll be to prove intent. I nodded slowly. So I just keep acting harmless. Exactly. Make her underestimate you. That night I walked back home under a bruised purple sky. The streetlights buzzed faintly, the same rhythm as the blood in my ears. Across the street, Kara stood on the porch phone pressed to her ear. Her voice carried across the quiet. She's losing it, she said. I saw her write something down again today. I think she's keeping a journal. No, she won't do anything. She's harmless. I stopped in the shadow of the maple tree, letting the branches frame me like a curtain. Harmless. She hung up and turned toward the door. I waited until she went inside before whispering, You keep telling yourself that. Over the next week, I played the part. I smiled when she waved from her car. I sent Ethan cheerful texts about my health. I even left a voicemail thanking her for the pastries. Every lie built another layer of camouflage. Meanwhile, Nora and I kept working. She forwarded the first batch of documents to a friend in the legal department, quietly, privately. Then one afternoon, a message arrived from Nora. She's behind on 2 payments, mortgage delinquent, pressures building. Be ready. That night I sat by the window and watched Kara pacing in her driveway, phone in hand, voice rising. I couldn't hear her words, but I didn't need to. Panic has its own language. When the light in her living room flickered out, I whispered into the recorder, You can change the locks, Kara, but I still hold the key. And for the first time since losing my home, I believed it. Rumors have a way of slipping through keyholes. They start as whispers drift across fences and settle into teacups and mailboxes. By the end of that week, I didn't have to plant anything. The street was already doing the work for me. It began with Mrs. Delaney from 2 doors down. I was standing in line at the market when she leaned in and whispered, "You know, Margaret, I've seen moving trucks at your old place, at night. Doesn't seem right, does it?" I smiled gently, feigning surprise. "Really? Must be renovations. Kara always loved to stay busy." "Renovations at midnight?" she asked, wrinkling her nose. I told my husband something's odd over there. I didn't have to say more. I just let the silence hang, the kind that invites imagination to fill in the blanks. By the time I reached the cashier, 2 more women were whispering near the produce section. Heads tilted toward each other like petals closing at dusk. That afternoon, I walked the long way home past the post office, past the school, taking the route that let me over here. On Rosehaven Lane, the air hummed with quiet speculation. I heard she's renting rooms out. One neighbor murmured near the hedge, "Illegal subletting, maybe. Or maybe she's losing the house." I didn't stop them. I just nodded politely as I passed their curiosity following me like perfume. Across the street, Kara's blinds twitched. She'd seen me. Good. By evening, the first hairline cracks in her composure had started to show. From my window, I watched her pacing the porch phone pressed to her ear, voice sharp enough to cut glass. She glanced toward the neighbors, toward the street, toward me. Her empire of control was starting to shrink. Nora called that night. I've been monitoring her filings. She hasn't made a payment in nearly 3 weeks. If she's fielding calls from creditors, she'll start spiraling soon. Be ready for her to lash out. "I'm already seeing it," I said. "She came here this morning pretending to check on me again, called me Mom, like it was an act she'd grown tired of." "Keep calm," Nora said. "Her guilt is becoming public now. That's the point where people like her start to collapse under their own weight." After I hung up, I stood by the window again. The streetlights painted everything in soft gold. I could see the shape of Kara sitting on the porch steps, shoulders slumped, phone glowing in her lap. For a moment she looked almost human, almost like the girl Ethan first brought home, bright, charming, too confident to be kind. I wondered if she ever thought about how it all began. The first dinner, the first time she called me Mom, the first time I saw her roll her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking. The house seemed smaller now, not physically but in spirit. Its windows didn't shine the way they used to. Even the roses by the walkway drooped petals heavy with neglect. It was as if the place itself was tired of being hers. Over the next few days, the gossip ripened. At the bakery, a clerk mentioned that Kara had been snapping at everyone lately. At the hardware store, someone joked that the Whitmore house must be cursed, 3 electricians, still no working lights. Each rumor carried a seed of truth watered by her own arrogance. I fed them gently when needed with a well-timed sigh or a half smile. "I hope she's all right," I'd say, voice soft with mock concern. It's a big house for one person to handle. The more I played the saint, the more they believed me. By the week's end, the cracks had spread. I saw Kara in the yard shouting at Ethan, waving her phone like a weapon. He turned away defeated and walked toward his car. She followed, still yelling. Then in a moment that felt almost sacred, she hurled the phone against the pavement. Its shattered screen scattering into glittering fragments. I caught it all on camera. Later that evening, Nora came by. We sat by the window drinking tea, the steam clouding the glass. "You've done well," she said. "She's unraveling in public. That'll make her harder to defend when this goes to court." I nodded slowly, eyes still on the house. Kara's curtains were closed, but I could almost feel her pacing behind them. "Do you ever feel sorry for them?" I asked. "For people like her," No, Nora said. "They build their lives on manipulation. You're just returning what's owed." Her words should have comforted me, but instead they left a chill. I thought of Ethan, his tired eyes, the way he couldn't look at me. Maybe guilt was genetic. Maybe he'd inherited her silence, too. When Nora left, I stayed at the window, notebook open, pen hovering above the page. I could hear faint voices outside, neighbors again, their gossip now louder, freer. They were talking about her, about how strange things had gotten at the Whitmore place. Kara had wanted power, attention, admiration. Now she had all of it turned against her. I wrote one line in my notebook before turning off the light. Reputation is just another kind of lock, and tonight I have the key. The first sign came in the form of a white envelope, big official heavy paper, the kind that doesn't carry good news. The mailman left it on Kara's porch that morning. By noon I saw her pick it up, tear it open, and freeze. From across the street I couldn't hear her voice, but I didn't have to. The way she staggered backward told me enough. Her face, usually tight with control, went slack. She read the letter once, then again, like the words might rearrange themselves into mercy if she stared long enough. An hour later, a black sedan pulled into the driveway. 2 men in suits stepped out, their expressions clipped and professional. I turned on the camera. The footage zoomed perfectly. Years of motherhood had trained my hands to hold steady, even when my heart didn't. They spoke for 10 minutes. Kara's posture shrank with every passing second. At one point, she gestured wildly toward the house, her lips forming the words, "It's a mistake." But the men didn't flinch. They handed her a stack of documents and left as quietly as they came. When the car drove off, Kara just stood there, papers dangling from her hand, sunlight catching the corner of a bank seal. She tore one page in half before going inside. By evening, Ethan's car appeared. He didn't even close the door behind him before she started yelling. The windows muffled the words, but her tone cut through the air, high, brittle, desperate. He paced hands up, trying to reason. She threw the torn papers at him. The sound of his suitcase zipper came next. He left without turning around. No hug, no pause, no backward glance. Just the dull slam of his car door and the echo of tires pulling away. I filmed that, too. For a long time after the headlights disappeared, Kara stood alone on the porch. Then in one sharp motion, she turned the lock. The same lock that once kept me out. I sat by my window camera still rolling and whispered, "Now you understand." When Nora arrived the next morning, I already had the footage cued. She watched in silence, her brow furrowing deeper with each passing minute. "This is it," she said when the screen went dark. "She's in default. The bank's begun proceedings. And with Ethan gone, she'll have no defense left. This is when we act." She handed me a small flash drive. "All your recordings, photos, notes, they're backed up here. I'll submit everything together once the claim hits the county system. If we move fast, we can restore the deed before foreclosure." I nodded. "And if she tries to sell it before then?" Nora smiled grimly. "She can't." The bank froze the title pending investigation. She's cornered. That evening, I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat in the dark, the hum of my old radiator filling the quiet. Across the street, Kara's house was dim except for the living room lamp. She paced back and forth, phone pressed to her ear. Her shoulders were rigid, her hair a mess, her expression wild. For the first time, I felt something close to pity. Not forgiveness, not really just that dull ache that comes when you see someone's facade collapse. Then I noticed something small. The porch light flickered, then steadied. The same flicker I'd watched 100 nights before. Only this time, it wasn't a comfort. It was a mirror. I turned the camera off and let the stillness settle. Maybe revenge wasn't about rage at all. Maybe it was about balance, the world righting itself one quiet consequence at a time. I made tea, the kettle whistling faintly, and spoke into my recorder. "Record 4. The bank came today. Kara's losing control. Ethan's gone. The locks keep turning, but they no longer belong to her. Justice doesn't need to shout, it just waits." The words filled the small room, soft but certain. When I looked back out the window, Kara was sitting on the porch steps, papers scattered around her like snow. Her head hung low, and for once she looked small in front of that big house. The same house she'd stolen. The same house she was about to lose. Nora called at dawn, her voice taut with something between triumph and disbelief. "Margaret," she said, "you're not going to believe what I found." I was still sitting by the window, tea cooling in my hands. "Try me. There's an older deed one your husband filed before he passed. It predates everything Kara forged. It names you as sole owner of the property. Not joint. Sole." I didn't answer at first. My breath felt heavy, like the air had thickened around me. "Are you sure I double-checked? It was filed under a sub-index probably overlooked when the new documents came in. The county clerk confirmed it's still valid. Kara's paperwork can't override it without your written consent." For a long moment I just sat there listening to the faint tick of the clock. After months of silence, humiliation, and watching from across the street, the universe had finally whispered back. "When can we file?" I asked. "Today," Nora said. "Bring your ID and the notarized copy of your signature. Once we reinstate it, she's done." I closed my notebook and stood. "Then let's finish this." The courthouse smelled like dust and disinfectant, cold bureaucratic air that had forgotten what justice was supposed to feel like. But when I signed the reinstatement form, my hands were steady. The clerk stamped it with a hollow thud that echoed louder than it should have. "That's it?" I asked. "That's it," Nora said. "By tomorrow her claim's invalid. She'll get notice by mail." But I didn't want to wait for the mail. That afternoon I walked home not to the rental, but across the street to the house that had haunted me for months. My heart beat slower than it should have, every step measured, deliberate. I stopped at the gate. The roses were still wilted. The paint on the porch rail chipped from where my husband once leaned his arm. I knocked once. Kara opened the door, hair disheveled, face pale from sleepless nights. The porch light flickered behind her. She looked smaller now, hollowed by fear. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. I held up a single envelope, the one stamped with the courthouse seal. "Delivering something." She snatched it, tearing it open without reading the front. Her eyes scanned the paper, then froze. "This is a mistake." "It's not," I said softly. "It's a correction." Her hands shook. "You can't do this. It's my home." "No," I said, my voice steady. "It's the home you borrowed while you lied." She laughed, brittle and sharp. "You can't even afford to keep it. You'll lose it in a year." "Maybe," I said, "but at least it'll be lost on my terms." Behind her, the house looked strange, foreign, empty. I could see the patch on the wall where my husband's photo used to hang, now replaced by an abstract print in dull gray. For months I'd thought this moment would feel like victory. Instead, it just felt like the end of a long fever. Kara's voice cracked. "Ethan doesn't know about this." "He will," I said. "He'll get the copy I mailed this morning." For a moment she looked like she might slap me, but then her shoulders fell, and she let out a small broken sound, half laugh, half sob. "You think you've won, but you've ruined everything." "I didn't ruin anything," I said. "You did. I just stopped cleaning up after you." She stood there trembling, the paper crumpling in her fist. Behind her, the kettle whistled faintly, an old reflex, maybe muscle memory from my habits that she never understood. When I turned to leave, she called after me, "You can't just take it back." I paused at the steps, looking over my shoulder. "I'm not taking it back, Kara. I'm taking it home." The door slammed behind me. Back in my room, I found Nora waiting with a small smile. "She'll get the official notice in 2 days," she said, "but the word's already spreading. The title's reverted to your name." I sat down slowly, hands folded in my lap. "I thought I'd feel happier." "You will," she said. "Right now it's just shock. You've been holding your breath for months." I nodded. Maybe she was right. Maybe peace comes quietly, not in celebration, but in the exhale after too long underwater. Across the street, the house stood silent. No music, no movement, no laughter. Just that flickering porch light stubbornly refusing to die. I poured myself another cup of tea and whispered into the recorder. Record 5, deed restored, ownership reinstated. She finally knows. My voice didn't tremble. Not once. I didn't plan for her to come that night, but part of me knew she would. Guilt doesn't rest. It paces. It looks for a target. The knock was hard frantic. I didn't bother pretending to be surprised. When I opened the door, Kara stood there, face blotched from crying, her coat half-buttoned. She looked more like a storm than a person. "You think you're clever?" she hissed, stepping inside without invitation. "You think this is over." I set my teacup down slowly, letting the silence do the heavy lifting. "It's been over for a long time, Kara. You just didn't notice." She paced the small room like a caged thing, her energy wild, erratic. "You destroyed my life, my business, my credit. Ethan's gone because of you. Ethan left because of truth." I said, "There's a difference." Her eyes gleamed full of something sharp. "You think anyone's going to believe you?" "Everyone knows you're old, confused." I smiled. It was the first real smile I'd had in months. "You should really stop underestimating me." She froze, sensing something shift in the air. I reached for the small recorder on the table and pressed play. The room filled with her voice, clear, arrogant, unmistakable. The recording from her housewarming party. "We'll sell it before she even realizes what happened," her voice said, light and mocking, punctuated by laughter. "Ethan's too soft to stop me." Kara's face drained of color. "You recorded me," she whispered. "No," I said. "You recorded yourself. I just kept the copy." The kettle on my small stove began to whistle, faint at first, then rising. Outside, the wind rattled the window pane like an audience holding its breath. She lunged forward, knocking the recorder from the table. It clattered across the floor, still playing her laughter. "You're insane!" she screamed. "You're ruining everything for nothing." I didn't move. "For nothing," I repeated softly. "You stole my home, Kara. You forged my name. You used my grief like a key. The only thing I've done is open the door you tried to lock." Her breathing came fast and uneven. She looked around the room as if searching for an exit that didn't exist. Then a calm voice spoke from the doorway. "I'd step away if I were you." Kara turned. Nora stood there, coat still damp from the rain, 2 uniformed officers behind her. One held a small stack of papers, the restraining order. "I filed it this morning," Nora said, based on the recording, the forgery, and her threats. Kara's mouth fell open. "You can't!" But the officer interrupted, reading her rights in a steady monotone. The words seemed to drain the room of air. Kara's defiance flickered, then died. When they escorted her out, she didn't look back. Only her perfume lingered, fading bitter sour. The door closed softly behind them. For a long time, neither Nora nor I spoke. The kettle had stopped whistling. Only the faint hiss of cooling metal remained. "She'll have a hearing next week," Nora said finally. "The title's already secure under your name. She's finished." I nodded. My hands were steady, but I couldn't quite feel them. "You did it," Nora said. "You got it all back." But the word back felt strange in my mouth. You can retrieve an object, a piece of paper, even a house, but not the version of yourself that lost it. I walked to the window, looking out at the street. The house stood there dark and quiet. The porch light had finally stopped flickering. Maybe the bulb had burned out. Maybe it had just had enough. "You know, I said I thought revenge would feel loud." "It never does," Nora replied. "It just feels finished." We drank tea in silence. The steam fogged the window, blurring the view, until the house looked like a watercolor memory, edges soft distance, merciful. Later that night, after Nora left, I picked up the recorder from the floor. The small red light still blinked. I pressed the button and whispered, "Record 6. She's gone. The locks are mine again." Outside, the street was empty. but I could almost hear my husband's voice low and steady, saying the words he'd said the day he installed that first lock decades ago. No thieves taking my house while I'm alive. He hadn't been wrong. It just took me a little longer to make sure of it. The morning after Kara's arrest was quieter than I expected. No flashing lights, no commotion, just the soft hum of dawn, as if the world had agreed to let me start over in silence. When Nora handed me the keys outside the courthouse, the metal felt warm, as though it had been waiting for me. "It's officially yours again," she said. "No pending claims, no liens. Clean title." For a moment I couldn't speak. My throat ached with something deeper than relief. I don't even know what to say. "Then don't," Nora replied. "Just go home." I walked. I didn't want to ride. I wanted to feel the distance each footstep between exile and return. Rosehaven Lane was the same yet different. The neighbors were outside trimming hedges, washing cars, pretending not to stare. Their polite smiles followed me up the drive like echoes of the gossip they'd shared about me and Kara. Let them look. Let them wonder. The gate squeaked as I pushed it open. The roses drooped dry and brittle but alive. I brushed a petal with my fingertip. It crumbled softly. "You waited for me," I whispered. The front door opened without resistance. The sound of the lock clicking from inside felt like a heartbeat restarting after a long pause. The air inside was stale, smelling faintly of citrus cleaner and loneliness. I walked through each room slowly. The walls were bare, her decorations gone, leaving only faint outlines where frames once hung. The furniture sat in its old places, familiar and foreign all at once. In the kitchen, sunlight filtered through the curtains, painting dust motes gold. I touched the counter where she'd once laid her papers, the same spot where I'd found proof of her lies. My fingers brushed the grain of the wood. It felt like forgiveness, rough but real. The teapot still sat on the stove, my old one with the chipped spout. I filled it with water, listening to the slow gurgle as it heated. The sound filled the room soft and steady. When it began to whistle, I let it. Nora arrived an hour later carrying 2 cups. She smiled when she saw me standing in the doorway. "You're already making tea. I should have known." "I don't know what else to do," I admitted. "Living is a good start," she said. We sat in the living room, the quiet stretching between us like an old friend. I could feel the house breathing again. For months, it had belonged to someone who treated it like a stage, something to perform on, not to love. But now it seemed to relax the walls, settling with soft cracks, as if recognizing my footsteps. "Any word on her?" I asked. "She's out on bail," Nora said. "Her lawyer's trying to negotiate, but there's not much to bargain with. The evidence is airtight." I nodded. I didn't feel satisfaction, not exactly. Just peace and exhaustion. "I keep thinking about Ethan," I said quietly. "He hasn't called." Nora hesitated. "He might need time. His world's falling apart too." "I know." I looked toward the window where sunlight stretched across the floorboards. But sometimes time doesn't fix things. It just teaches you how to live without them. The kettle whistled again. I poured us each another cup, the steam curling between us. The sound was soft, familiar, a heartbeat from another life. When Nora left, I stood at the threshold watching her car disappear down the lane. Then I walked through the rooms again, touching everything. Walls, doorknobs, the old banister my husband sanded smooth one summer. Each surface held a memory, laughter, arguments, the weight of years spent belonging somewhere. In the master bedroom, I found the box I'd hidden years ago under the floorboard. Inside was my husband's watch, still ticking faintly. I wound it twice and set it on the dresser. The ticking filled the room, a steady rhythm that sounded like home. I didn't cry. There was no need. Some losses can't be undone, only absorbed. When dusk fell, I lit a single lamp and opened the front windows. The air smelled like rain again. Across the street, my old rented room sat dark. I'd already paid the last month's rent and left the key under the mat. I whispered to the empty house, "I'm home." The words felt right this time, simple, unbroken enough. The porch light flickered once and held steady, casting a golden halo on the steps. I sat by the window, sipping my tea, watching the street grow quiet. Somewhere deep inside the house, a floorboard creaked like the echo of my husband's footsteps. It wasn't haunting. It was memory, and for the first time in months, the silence felt kind. I spent the next few days in quiet. No calls, no visits, no questions from neighbors who wanted gossip disguised as concern. I scrubbed the kitchen counters, aired out the closets, and polished the banister until it caught the afternoon sun. Each small act felt like reclaiming a language I'd forgotten how to speak. The house no longer echoed, it listened. On the fourth morning, I drove into town and bought a new lock. Not one of those digital ones with glowing numbers Kara would have chosen, but a solid silver deadbolt with weight and honesty. The kind of lock that doesn't lie. When I came back, the porch was bathed in gentle sunlight. I set down my tools on the steps and ran my hand across the doorframe. The old screw holes stared back at me, small ghosts of every version of this house that had existed. My husband's Ethan's, Kara's mine. It was time to make it mine again. The screwdriver bit into the metal with a clean click. Turn by turn, I removed the old lock, the one Kara installed that day. She said it was for safety. The screws fell into my palm light as ashes. I slid the new mechanism into place, firm, exact, deliberate. When the bolt finally clicked, the sound filled the doorway like a heartbeat returning. I stepped back and looked at the silver glint in the sun. "That's better," I said softly. Inside, I made tea, the same ritual, the same chipped kettle. I poured a cup and carried it out to the porch, sitting where my husband used to read the paper. The air smelled of fresh paint and rain on wood. I thought about Ethan. He hadn't called since the night he left Kara. Maybe shame is another kind of silence. Maybe he needed to disappear before he could see clearly again. So I wrote him a letter. Not long, just a page. "The house is safe. Your father would have forgiven you sooner than I will. But you still have a key if you want to come home one day." I folded it neatly, placed a copy of the new key inside, and sealed the envelope. I didn't add a return address. I didn't need to. As I walked to the mailbox, I passed the neighbors trimming hedges again. They waved cautiously, uncertain which version of me they were greeting, the ghost, the widow, the victor. I waved back. It didn't matter. When I came back, the porch light flickered once and then steadied. I smiled. "You're learning," I whispered to it. I sat there for a long time watching the sun dip behind the maple tree, painting the windows gold. The street was quiet, except for the distant hum of cicadas. The same house I'd once watched from across the street now surrounded me, warm and breathing again. It was strange the way victory could feel like grief in disguise. I missed the woman I used to be, the one who baked too much, forgave too easily, trusted her son's silences. But in her place stood someone sharper, quieter, made of tempered truth. When the first evening breeze brushed against the curtains, I picked up the recorder one last time. "Record 7, I said. "Locks changed, house restored, all debts paid. The noise has stopped." A pause. Then softer. "I think I finally understand what peace sounds like." I set the recorder down and watched the porch light cast long shadows across the steps. The silver lock gleamed faintly, catching the last of the sun. It was just a door, wood and metal, but it meant something again. It meant choice. It meant safety. It meant home. When darkness settled, I locked the door myself, slowly, deliberately. The click echoed through the hall, not harsh, but final. I took one last sip of tea, the flavor cooling on my tongue, and whispered to the empty rooms, "You took my home, Kara, but you taught me how to keep it." The house creaked once as if agreeing. Outside, the wind picked up rustling through the maple leaves, and for the first time in a long while, I slept without checking the window.